Welcome back to the class. We are moving to the 10th week, and in this week we are looking into Dalit sociology and Indian sociology. Okay, the kind of influence that the Dalit studies have had on Indian sociology, and the kind of questions that raised, and how the mainstream sociology responded to that, and what are the kind of critical, epistemological, and methodological questions that Dalit sociology raises in the Indian sociology. So, as you know, caste system and its discrimination and practices of untouchability have caught the attentions of scholars and administrators ever since the very beginning of colonialism. And you know about the history of colonial intervention in many of these practices. You also know a series of social movements that have sprung up in every major places in India. Okay, basically to fight the social atrocities, the social injustices and discriminations. And at the same time, as we have seen, the initial or the most predominant theoretical frameworks emerge in India, whether it is ideological approach or structural functionalism, and or even structuralism to a large extent, kind of glossed over the issues of discrimination, exploitation and injustice. Okay? This is a very important one, because when you talk about Indologists, or when you talk about the scholars who use this book view, okay, including Guri and others, their preoccupation was about how Hindu social system, okay, offered you specific values and institutions and structures that provided a kind of a sense of coherence to society, and even structural functionalism to a large extent, as represented by, say, Srinivas and others. Of course, they mentioned about the caste system and the way in which it works. It never, of course, they mentioned about Dalits, but it did not look at it as a problematic. Okay, it did not think that the Dalits, they really deserve a kind of a more attention, because of the very fact that for the past several centuries, okay, these categories have been at the receiving end of caste system. They have been facing various forms of discrimination, various forms of exploitation and injustice, and because of that very very social position that they occupy, okay, because of their very subordinated position, okay, very subordinated position that they occupy, their experiences and their stories will have something more insightful to contribute to sociology was never accepted. And it was as typical of any other discipline. The initial phases of Indian sociology was dominated by upper caste and class, and that very well gets reflected in their works as well. Brahmins as a social class, or as a social as a caste group, were the first to make use of these new opportunities, and that got reflected in their priority areas, that got reflected in the kind of work that they conducted, and that has been the story of Indian sociology, which came under very serious criticism by later scholars who pointed out this particular lacuna. And let me also remind you, this is not only something concerning with sociology alone, but this is true with every social science, not only in India but elsewhere as well. The dominant group of any society who makes use of these opportunities, who enters into the portals of higher education and knowledge production, obviously will have their own biases and then prejudices, okay, either knowingly or unknowingly. And it requires a lot of reflection, lot of critical thinking, lot of intervention from outside to bring in new perspectives and other things. That is something very important, and that is true in the case of women's sociology, that is true in the case of Dalit sociology. So it's not that natural that men sociologists would naturally interested in women's issues and then produce scholarship on that. It never works in that way. It hardly works in that way. So then you have the rise of Dalit studies, new generation of scholars and scholarships in the last maybe 20-30 years played a major role, and that has really brought in a lot of new energy, new vitality to the discipline, and the discipline was forced to move away from its traditional comfort zone, and then address a lot of questions that are raised by these Dalit scholars and Dalit scholarship. And also interesting or important is that these changes happen not because some kind of churning happened within sociology, but also in the literary field. Okay, Indian society began to witness a surge of Dalit literature. Dalit poets and Dalit short story writers, novelists began publishing their genre of literature in different regional languages, and they were translated, and they were amazingly sociological. They had amazing sociological insights into that, thereby forcing many of the sociologists to take cognizance of the kind of a different worldview and epistemological positions that these experiences, these stories tell, and that had a very significant impact on the mainstream sociology as well. And of course, any discussion that we begin on Dalit has to begin with Ambedkar. And I don't need to elaborate the centrality of Ambedkar in the Dalit scholarship. An iconic man, a man who maybe rightly, very rightly revered and respected and celebrated across the nook and corner of the country. And you would have seen there's hardly any place in India which is not dotted by a statue of Ambedkar. Okay, highly respected and revered by the Dalits, and a person who fought single-handedly for the Dalit group with unimaginable courage and conviction. Okay, and I don't need to go into that, but we need to begin with this discussion with Ambedkar, focusing on two of his works. Okay, so in this class, I'm focusing on two of his works, and this would be kind of concerning Ambedkar. And B.R. Ambedkar, 1891-1956, revolutionary political figure and the leader of the Dalit movement in India. These are all known facts. Fought for the liberation of oppressed communities in India. Studied in the distinguished institutions like Columbia University, London School of Economics, and University of London. And when Ambedkar came back after his studies abroad, he was the most educated person. Okay, he was the most educated person, coming from the Mahar caste, coming from the untouchable caste, and he was the most educated person. And yet he had to face harassment, he had to face discrimination at the hands of upper caste but uneducated people, and that turned him into a real revolutionary. Okay, a person with uncompromising, unflinching conviction about certain things, a very, very courageous person. A very courageous person who was defeated only by Mahatma Gandhi, okay, through some maybe very controversial mechanisms. I'm referring to the Pune Pact, the kind of issues associated with the Pune Pact. Gandhiji went on an indefinite strike when Ambedkar demanded for a separate electorate, and Ambedkar had to finally give in. Okay, because it is, in a way, it is a kind of very unethical and immoral way of political engagement. Okay, that somebody is going on an indefinite fast and to demand the withdrawal of a particular political demand put forward by Ambedkar. So that has been extremely controversial, that Gandhiji as a great leader had to resort to this, and then which led to the kind of changes that we have seen earlier. And the founder of the Independent Labour Party and Scheduled Caste Federation, and chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee. All these points. I don't need to remember that. And served as a minister of the law in the first Jawaharlal Nehru ministry. So Ambedkar was an administrator. He was a politician. He was an orator. He was a writer. He has written extensively, and he was also a scholar. He was an economist. He was trained as an economist, but he was also a historian. He has written extensively on caste. He has written extensively on almost every social dimensions associated with Dalits. So a very, very multifaceted person. So these are the important works. Caste in India, their mechanisms, genesis and development, Annihilation of Caste. So in this class, we are just having a quick look at these two essays. Then Pakistan on the partition of India, who were the Shudras, the Buddha and his Dhamma, Buddha of or Karl Marx, riddles in Hinduism. These are the published works, some of Ambedkar. And Ambedkar offered a multi-layered counter-hegemonic reading of caste that has not received serious scholarly attention from at least 3 generations of sociologists in India. This is a very damning statement because sociologists did not take Ambedkar very seriously. Okay, they might have felt that he is not methodical, he is not sophisticated enough, he did not follow the contours of the discipline. But that was they were all highly erroneous assumptions, because the kind of scholarship and the kind of the political vision that Ambedkar expressed, okay, it had a huge resonance with millions of Dalits in India. That is why he is respected and revered and celebrated even today. He challenged a Brahminical production of knowledge on India that privileged the Hindu worldview, where Brahmin was at the center and offered an emancipatory perspective that addressed the hierarchies and inequalities in Indian society. So he was frontal in its attack. He was undisguised in his attack against the Brahminism in particular, and to Hinduism in general. Okay, that is the most undigestible or the most provocative aspects of Ambedkar that many people found it difficult to accept him, because he believed that Dalits have no future in India as long as they continue to live as Hindus, because he understood, or he argued that Hinduism without casteism will not survive. Okay, so every attempt to reform Hinduism from within is meaningless. It is futile, and that is why he declared that even though I was born as a Dalit, I will not die as a Dalit, and then he converted into Buddhism. And that again inspired a lot of people to take these followers, and there is a large scale conversions into Buddhism from the scheduled caste population. So Ambedkar was a stringent critique of Hinduism. He burned Manusmriti. Okay, very controversial and very daring act. He burnt Manusmriti in public because he was fighting the Brahminical dominance. He understood and then argued that the central ideological fountainhead of casteism is Brahminism. Brahminism is the one which is providing the theoretical, ideological, and moral legitimacy to caste system. Even though the violence and other things can come from every other caste, the ideological underpinnings, okay, the religious explanations, the religious justifications for purity and pollution and discrimination, they are all extremely Brahminical. Whether either written by Brahmins or by non-Brahmins, they are all Brahminical. So Ambedkar's entire fight was targeted at that. He offered a theory of caste focusing on its genesis, development, and mechanisms, as well as a manifesto for the annihilation of caste. And this is again a very important thing. This annihilation of caste was his agenda. That was on his agenda. Okay, he was not happy with the kind of reforms. Okay, he had fed up with reformist promises and hollow promises. He wanted the annihilation of caste. Now we'll just briefly go through these two works. One is Caste in India, their mechanisms, genesis, and development, written in 1917. This is a paper presented by Ambedkar in an anthropological seminar in New York in 1916, and later published in the journal Indian Antiquary in 1970s. In this work, he examined the origin, development, and working mechanisms of caste in India. He maintained that caste has a cultural unity that emerged through constant contact and mutual intercourse of different cultures. Okay, so he was somebody who argued that the rules and regulations evolved as a result of constant contact and mutual intercourse of different cultures. The cultural unity is the basis of homogeneity in India, and caste is the parceling of this homogeneous unit. So he explains how caste really provides a kind of as the basis for this kind of a homogeneous cultural articulations. Ambedkar begins his paper by examining the works of Sennett, Nesfield, H.S. Risley, Ibsen, and Dr. Kedkar on caste and their limitations. So these are all the Indologist scholars who anthropologists and then Indologists who put forward different theories on the genesis and emergence and later development of sociology. The Western scholarship had identified 5 nuclei around which castes have formed. One is occupation, survival of tribal organizations, rise of new beliefs, crossbreeding and migration. However, Ambedkar finds these as secondary or derivative in character. So, for Ambedkar, these are all are secondary in its character, not something that constitutive of the central dynamics of caste. Ambedkar found Kedkar's analysis of the caste much more nuanced. Kedkar defined caste in its relation to a system of caste and has concentrated his attention only on those characteristics which are absolutely necessary for the existence of a caste as a system, and that is prohibition of intermarriage and membership by autogeny. Okay, so this now again it's a commonsensical knowledge that the most important pillar that sustains the edifice of caste system is prohibition of intermarriage. Okay, even now you know that the proportion of intercaste marriages in India is around 5%, maybe 5 to 6%. It's as low as that, and at least for the past 2000 years, at least for the past 2000 years, endogamy has been the most important cornerstone of caste system. So Kedkar identified prohibition of intermarriage and membership by autogeny. You need to take birth into that, into a caste. You can't get a membership into a caste. Okay, you can get converted into a religion is possible, but you can never get membership into a caste unless you are born into that. However, Ambedkar argued that the 2 primary characteristics of caste offered by Dr. Kedkar in reality are the 2 sides of the same coin. Because if you prohibit intermarriages, the result is that you limit membership to those born within the group, isn't it? Because in the absence of intercaste marriage, then the membership is only through autogeny. You have to be born into the same caste, and your parents must belong to the same caste, and there is no possibility of intercaste marriages and then you being born as somebody without a caste. Thus, Ambedkar concluded that endogamy is the only characteristic that is peculiar to caste. Exploring how endogamy is introduced and maintained, Ambedkar later elucidated the genesis and the mechanisms of caste in India. He argued that caste did not have a religious origin and that the Hindu lawgivers like Manu had merely codified and preached existing caste practices. So he rejects the kind of a religious argument that the Hindu the caste system has a religious origin and the like. The origin of caste, according to Ambedkar, is the origin of the mechanism of endogamy. Okay, Indian society was characterized by the custom of exogamy that prohibits marriages between sapinda, the bloodkin, as well as sagotra of the same class. Sagotra, it's a gotra, is a particular lineage group. You identify yourself as the progenies of a particular person, and all the people who belong to that particular group are seen as belong to the same gotra, and so sagotra exogamy is something, endogamy is something not permitted in many groups. So over this exogamous society, the principle of endogamy was introduced, and this superimposition of endogamy on exogamy means the creation of caste. So he is, this particular argument has been contested, has been questioned by many other scholars, but Ambedkar's argument is very clear. On the one hand, he says there is no religious origin to caste system, and secondly, the central arguments, the central arrangement of caste is nothing but the emphasis and importance given to endogamy. However, it was not easy to reconcile the principle of endogamy in a society where exogamy was the custom. This has taken place through complex rules of marriage that take account of the difficulties in maintaining an even sex ratio among persons of the marriageable age from marriageable groups within a caste. The problem of caste then ultimately resolves itself into one of repairing the disparity between the marriageable units of 2 sexes within that. So once you impose the rule of endogamy into a society which follows exogamy, then naturally the questions of some people getting sufficient number of brides and other group not getting that arises. Ambedkar quoted in Kannabiran 2009. Imbalances in the sex ratio arising from the death of spouse from within the caste, surplus women and surplus men then are dealt with in one of the three ways. A surplus woman may be burnt on her husband's funeral pyre, which is known as sati. Enforced widowhood and imposed celibacy. Again, these are two very, very predominant features of Hinduism. The practice of sati and the prohibition of widow remarriage. I don't need to elaborate it further, and it was through sustained legal interventions and social reform movements that these practices were kind of controlled. And a surplus man would take a wife from a girl below marriageable age so that the balance in the marriageable age cohort is not disturbed. So this how he elaborates the genesis of caste. Sati, enforced widowhood and girl marriage are the three mechanisms through which endogamy and by extension caste is preserved and perpetuated. This closed door system endogamy was originated from the Brahmin caste and later imitated by all non-Brahmin subdivisions or classes, who in turn became endogamous castes. Those castes that are nearest to Brahmin have imitated all the three customs and insist on the strict observance thereof. Those that are less near have enforced widowhood and girl marriage. Others a little further off have only girl marriage, and those furthest have limited only the belief in the caste principle. And this is again something very interesting. It's again substantiated by scholars who have looked into the process of Sanskritization, as we have discussed in some of the previous classes, because in their attempt to claim an upper caste position, okay, some of the practices adopted by the lower caste include the prohibition of widow remarriage and child marriage. Okay, in the lower castes, as that's exactly what Ambedkar says. When you go down in the caste hierarchy, okay, the kind of imposition, the restrictions imposed on women come down. The women in the lower sections of society have much more freedom. If a person loses her husband, then she is much more freer among the lower caste to get married again, compared to a Brahmin widow or an upper caste woman who would be forced to remain unmarried till the rest of her life. So Ambedkar is very, very, very clear in his argument that these rules were imposed or imitated from the top. And the second important essay by Ambedkar is Annihilation of Caste. Okay, this is around 40-page document, an essay. It was supposed to be present, to be delivered in a talk in Lahore, organized by an organization called the Jatpat Todak Mandal in Lahore in 1936. And it has a very interesting story. So they invite Ambedkar to be its chairman, and they claim that they are a reformist organization working against caste. So Jatpat Todak Mandal, its very aim itself is to fight against caste system. And Ambedkar sends the draft of his speech to be printed and to be circulated. And when the organizers read this speech, they get a shock because it's very provocative. And then they they send him a mail reply saying that your speech contains quite a lot of very inflammatory and contentious and provocative sections. You need to kind of change some of them. And Ambedkar insists that I will not change a comma in the essay. And so ultimately he did not go. It was undelivered, okay, in that sense. And later Ambedkar prints several hundreds of copies of that and then distributes, because it was not done. And later it became one of the most celebrated works of Ambedkar. And recently, some 10-15 years back, it was reintroduced with an introduction by Arundhati Roy, which again created a lot of controversies and other things. So his speech was cancelled by the organizers, citing that it was too radical. And in this speech, Ambedkar offered an emancipatory perspective to annihilate caste and reform Hinduism. So this is the text which should have been, yeah, it says it's not delivered. So it has a very interesting biography. Annihilation of caste is more difficult than the other national causes, namely Swaraj. Imagine Ambedkar was in the thick of nationalist movement, but he identifies that the nationalist movement and the aim of attaining independence is only part of the story. The real freedom of his men, the real freedom of the Dalit come only when they also have politically and socially emancipated. Okay, the social emancipation, social democracy is a very core idea of Ambedkar. In the light for Swaraj, you fight with the whole nation on your side. In this, you have the fight against the whole nation and that too your own. But it is more important than Swaraj. There is no use of having Swaraj if you cannot defend it. More important than the question of defending Swaraj is the question of defending the Hindu under Swaraj. In my opinion, only when the Hindu society becomes a casteless society that it can hope to have strength enough to defend itself. Without such an internal strength, Swaraj for Hindus may turn out to be only a step towards slavery. Okay, very forceful, very powerful, very radical arguments. So, Ambedkar's critique of nationalist and socialist, Ambedkar was less patient with the kind of social reformism that was articulated by the Hindu upper caste. So, recognizing the social evils of society, the political leadership of India has founded Indian National Social Conference. Actually, Indian National Social Conference was a social reform wing of Indian National Congress. And it was under the leadership of M.G. Ranade and Raghunath Rao. Ambedkar maintained that social conference had failed to make an impact in society precisely because the kind of social reforms that it was advocating. So for Ambedkar, these attempts are merely lip service. Okay, these attempts are merely superficial. Okay, they are just gimmicks. They are not going to touch the cornerstone of the issue. It's not going to touch the central concern of the whole thing. While they advocated for the social reforms of Hindu families, widow remarriage, abolition of child marriage, etc., they did not advocate for the reorganization and reconstruction of Hindu society. Okay, when you continue to cling on to the rules of endogamy, when you continue to ensure that you get married only within your own caste and do not allow intercaste marriage, then you are not ultimately going to change anything according to Ambedkar. Okay, so all these things about widow remarriage and abolition of child marriage, they're all are the products of an insistence on caste endogamy, and it must be broken. And as you know, this was too radical a demand for the Hindu orthodoxy. The failure of the social conference is due to their indifference towards the project of breaking up the caste system. Ambedkar also criticized socialists of his time as they had not paid sufficient attention to the problem of caste. And this is a usual criticism raised against socialists and communists because they do not recognize caste as a important social phenomenon. And for them, the class is more important. And they even argued that the caste system will disappear if a classless society comes to existence. And they are all highly myopic, superficial views. Can it be said that the proletariat of India, poor as it is, recognizes no distinction except that of the rich and the poor? Can it be said that the poor in India recognizes no such distinctions of caste or creed, high or low? How can there be a revolution if the proletarian cannot present a unified front? Very pertinent question. It talks about the caste consciousness of the proletariat, and it is also right about the caste consciousness of the bourgeoisie, or the caste consciousness of the upper class. For a revolution to be possible, Ambedkar maintained there should be a spirit of personal freedom and fraternity among the compatriots. Caste eliminates this possibility because caste always brings in invisible, unchangeable, immutable divisions between people. Okay, you are not an autonomous individual. You are not an individual who is capable of taking your own decision, even about choosing your own life partner. You become a part of a community, you become a part of a caste, and whose rules and regulations are very stringent about the options in front of you about choosing your life partner. And that Ambedkar argues is meaningless. Thus, for an economic and political reform, the monster of caste must be annihilated first. Now, caste system as a division of laborers. Ambedkar criticized the tendency to identify the caste system as a form of division of labor on the following ground. And this is one of the most striking arguments of Ambedkar. He would argue that caste system is not a division of labor. Of course, it's a division of labor, but it is much more pernicious than that. It is much more, dangerous than that, because it is a eternal permanent division of laborers. Those who are into different occupations, okay, in the traditional caste system, it is a division of labor from which they cannot escape, and that cannot be conflated with our modern day understanding of division of labor. Okay, our modern day understanding of division of labor assumes that people are given different jobs on the basis of their ability, their aptitude, their merit and other things, and people can move from one job to another. There is mobility within that. But Ambedkar very correctly observed that caste system is nothing but a division of laborers permanently. A person who is born here as a blacksmith or as a barber or as a washerman will continue to do that. Okay, it will continue to do that, and in spite of his aspirations or his talents or his ideas or his ability or his merit, he will continue to do so. And somebody who is born here will continue to do so. Somebody who is born here will continue to do so. And they are hugely unequal. They are hugely unequal. They are hugely exploitative. They are hugely unequal. So the caste system is not merely a division of labor. It is also a division of laborers. There is an unnatural division of laborers into watertight compartments. And it's a graded inequality. Caste system is a hierarchy in which division of laborers are graded one above the other. It is unfounded in other civilized societies. So again, look at the kind of a prestige attached to different jobs. Look at the kind of stigma attached. Okay, these two are corresponding. On the one hand, you have the prestige attached to, say, that of priests and teachers on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have the stigma, social stigma and humiliation attached to people who do the menial jobs, people who remove human excreta. Okay, they are condemned forever. The stigma never goes away from such a caste. The division of labor is not spontaneous. That is, it's not based on natural aptitude. Rather, it appoints tasks to individuals in advance based on social status of the parents. So that's the point he again and again argued. A person whose work is scavenging or manual scavenging, his child is supposed to do that. A child of a barber is supposed to do the same job. So it's not, there is no open field in which somebody can explore the possibilities. And then caste as public enemy. Caste system prevented Hindus from forming a real society or nation, as it killed common activity and unified life. It has also killed public spirit, public charity and public understanding, as virtues has become caste-ridden and morality caste-bound. Caste deprives Hindus from mutual trust, help and fellow feelings, as one's only concerned about, responsible to and restricted to their own caste. Very, very sharp attacks on the pernicious influence of caste system on society. Okay, he argued it prohibits you it prevents you from developing a more broader understanding of humanity. Okay, it prohibits you. It prevents you from developing a sense of empathy or likeness towards an other person, and you are brainwashed to the idea that your existence and your obligation is only to your own caste member. And we have seen the kind of such articulations throughout. Then towards annihilating caste. Mounting a heavy criticism on Hindu sacred texts, Vedas and Shastras, Ambedkar argued that the most important key to destroying caste is the rejection of the authority of these sacred texts. And that's why I told you he burnt Manusmriti. Okay, supposedly a very, very, very controversial action. He envisioned a society based on the ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity. And that is why these terms are there in the Indian Constitution. And Indian Constitution is a testimony to the spirit of that. He put forward two plans of action for the annihilation of caste, encouraging interdining, but it was not really successful in killing the spirit of caste and caste consciousness. Just imagine, he is making this as an action. Okay, even to sit together and then having food together was unimaginable for the for a large number of people then. Food was served, food was taken depending upon the caste positions. It was impossible for the upper caste people to sit together with the lower caste and then eat food together. That was seen as a revolutionary act, and Ambedkar proposes that. And then encouraging intermarriage. Most effective way of cultivating a feeling of being kith and kin is through the fusion of blood. Okay, and this solution remains only as a as an utopian ideal, because even now, as I mentioned, the percentage of intercaste marriages in India continue to be less than 5 to 6%, even in this modern, advanced, progressed India. So these are the references: Ambedkar's writings and speeches, and Kannaveeran, Sociology of Caste and the Crooked Mind, an essay appeared in Economic and Political Weekly. So I am winding up the class here. I wanted this week to start with Ambedkar because he is the towering figure of Indian sociology and that of the Dalit sociology. So any discussion on Dalit sociology in India should not miss out without starting with Ambedkar. Okay. So see you with other classes in the coming session. Thank you.